Hey, thanks for listening to our podcast. If you want to listen live in the central Indiana area, you can hear us on 93.5 FM and 107.5 FM. Meantime, he's on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. It's all you need to know and then some about the NFL, about Jacoby Brissett, about Andrew Luck Day, and about the Chargers coming up on Sunday. Here's Rick Venturi. Hello, Rick.
What do you say, John? I guess the best thing I can say is I love that Florida line, that cruising song. I wasn't out in the convertible, but I will say this: that Honda Goldwing did get some mileage today. I was up by by Old Grissom Air Force Base, where the Air Force Base used to be, north of Kokomo. Just a beautiful ride in the country. But you know what? This is such an exciting week. As a coach, I always say there's 3 days. There's kind of 3 days that I miss in my present capacity. Obviously, the first day of training camp was always a big juice day for me. The first day of the regular season, and, of course, playoff football. But the first game of the regular season, it's full of excitement, number one. You're totally excited to get out there and go after all this time. And yet there's a bunch of unknown. I mean, in some ways, I've always said that if you combine two holidays, you would get this feeling. It's like Christmas and Halloween. In some respects, you're opening all your new packages, all your new toys, and that's the Christmas part of it. And then sometimes the Halloween, the craziest things happen in the openers, upsets in the openers. And that's also a day when the dreams can turn into nightmares and pumpkins. So, after all this time and talk and training and all the moves and everything, it's for real on Sunday, and I can't wait.
All right. Since people have been asking me this, and I'm apprehensive, and here's why. People have suggested, Rick, and I know this is really not where you hang as far as total wins, total losses, whatever. But people have asked me, and I find it hard-pressed to believe that this team can be what it was without Luck and with Brissett. And I could be completely wrong, and hopefully I am. Give me some reasons for or against why you may or may not believe something similar here, or at least what do you expect from the Colts with Jacoby under center?
Yeah, the reason that I think they could be pretty damn good and that they definitely will be competitive for the division championship is one. And this is not going to be a team like Andrew Luck. I mean, you can't. I don't think you can compare Jacoby Brissett, who's a total unknown, absolute unknown. I mean, going into this game, I mean, we've seen some things in 17, we've seen some things in training camp, but he is a total unknown. But I think this is a really good team. I think this is the best team that we've put out on the field in a long, long time, in many years, really, from top to bottom. I think your defense, which was 10th in the league against the score, if they can improve on that, if they can get that 21 points a game, let's say, John, down to 17, and I think that's very possible. I mean, whether it's probable or not, we'll find out. We're going to know about this team in the first 5 weeks. When we hit the bye week, we'll know exactly what this team is, to be honest with you, and that's why I hesitate to make a lot of predictions. But I will say that there's a way to win a lot of games. Also, you have a ton of weapons on offense, and we talked about this a little bit Friday, but, Hilton is an elite player at the Z. I think you got two young kids that are just going to smoke it. That's Campbell, basically Campbell and Kane. I mean, you got guys that are not just guys that can catch a 5-yard hook or 10-yard hook. All three of those guys can take it to the house on any play. You got a role player, I think, in Funchess, a possession kind of guy. You got two tight ends who, it's hard to – I don't think you can match them in the league. I don't think there's two tight ends as good as our two tight ends. Offensive line, if it picks up where it left last year, the last 11 games when Costanzo was back, 8 sacks in 11 games, 121 yards rushing a game. Anthony is as big a key as anything. We cannot lose that guy. He's one of the most valuable players on this team that nobody talks about. But you got Marlon Mack, who's a really good runner. So really, I think what you're looking at is a really good team that we're putting out there, probably the best team in the AFC South. Not necessarily the best quarterback, but the best team. And so I think what you're looking at is a team that will win that way. They will win in total rather than a quarterback-centric team that relies on the quarterback and everything else is complementary. Now, the key is there is no such thing as managing a game. You've heard me say that. That's a media myth, John, and it's a management myth. In coaching, one thing I know is that quarterback, no matter how much you surround him and how you try to manage the game for him, there is going to be, depending on the game, there's going to be between 7 and 15 to 16 throws in that game that he's going to have to make that are critical. Third downs, red zone, 2 minutes, things like that. I mean, you can never take the ball out of the quarterback's hands. So the question is, this is a talented guy. This is a guy with tools. We've seen things that we like about him. We've seen things we don't like about him. There's plenty of things I don't like about him. But, he looks to be in total like he has some skill. So I think the key is what can Frank Reich and what can Sirianni do to complement him, to max him out, to run the type of schemes where he will flourish and get to the top of his game, and then as a team you go on. I mean, if you look at the rest of the division, I've already started on Tennessee. I mean, we've basically had our way with Tennessee. They're not really improved. In some ways, they wasted a number 1 draft pick for this year. Mariota is in the fight for his life just to survive. He's proven not to be that key, that top flight franchise quarterback in the pocket. Houston is in flux. I mean, it's hard to say what they are. The Clowney thing is one thing. They did help themselves, I think, by going out and getting Tunsil. I think they helped themselves because their offensive line is horrific. But, they lost their top runner. Yeah, they got Hyde, but, they've lost their top runner. They're really in a state of flux, no matter what anybody says. And then Jacksonville, you have to believe in Foles. And here's my take on Foles, because I was in St. Louis. I wasn't coaching, but I was already in the broadcast booth. And Foles is the guy, John, if you look at it closely, his success has come in Philadelphia, and it's come off the bench. It's come kind of relieved of pressure, kind of as that backup guy that comes in. I'm not going to define it as house money, but it's a little bit like house money. And he's gone out and been great. But at no time that he was given the keys to the kingdom has he ever been great. I mean, really, seriously. So, I mean, it isn't like, I think the AFC has really totally changed from our opinions probably in February and March, because there's been all these different things happening with the Colts and with everybody else. So, it's kind of a I would say kind of an unknown, now. I think everybody thought it was a great division. I think it's maybe a division in flux right now. So we will just see. Like I said, with the Colts, we are going to know, in that first 5 weeks, you're going to start with the Chargers, which I think is winnable, but it's a good team. And then you're going to finish that first 5 weeks with the Chiefs, which is legitimately a good team. You've got the Raiders, who I think will be one of the most improved teams in the league. The Falcons, I think the Falcons are struggling and can be had, and I certainly think Tennessee can be had. But we will know in that first 5 weeks, because I think by that time, Jacoby will define himself, good or bad.
Rick Venturi is with us via the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. I want to take a break, and we're going to come back here. And the first thing I want to talk with you about is the difference between this offense, and Nick Sirianni brought it up a little bit earlier today, too, in a little Q&A with the local media, the difference between Brissett under center with this team compared to how they were doing it offensively with Luck. Can we go there with you next?
Absolutely.
All right, Rick Venturi is on hold. We'll come back. We also got more fantasy football slots for you over the course of the afternoon and more stuff to give away. Rick, your calls, your questions, and more. Other side next. Back to the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Rick Venturi joins us. I saw Sirianni talking to the media today. What do you expect might be a not-so-subtle change, or most that will be similar with Brissett under center instead of Luck?
Well, I think they will be similar, but there's certain things I think you want to do with Brissett that you would do some of them with Andrew, but particularly on the deep stuff and the play action, I would approach it a little bit different. Now, what you want to get in the end is you want to get a decisive game by him, a compact and accurate game. That's what you got to get from him from a physical standpoint. Now, to get that, this is where I think he's looked the best in training camp when I watched every single practice and when I watched those games. First of all, you want a lot of quick rhythm passing with him, things that get defined really quickly. Now, the advantage you have is even though this team plays a lot of personnel groups on defense, nickel, dime, base, when it's all said and done, it's one of the most simplistic coverage schemes in the National Football League. It's like Seattle light. It's about a million ways to play cover 3 or 3 deep. So it isn't a real complex system on first and second down. So you want to make money on first and second down with him. Now, a lot of that you want to be able to hit in the cracks to your tight ends, in the seams, play at and then I think you want to move him because he's really good on the move. So, your bootlegs, I think you can run the zone read a little bit more with him than you would run it with Andrew. I think he's ready for it. If you look at the couple games that he played for New England, Bill played him like almost a college quarterback. Now, I'm not saying doing that because he's a pro quarterback, but he can run, he can operate the zone reads, the quick rhythm, the bootlegs. I think he can really excel on those things. I think the biggest thing with him is that when you want to throw the ball deep with the play action, you want it quick play action. You don't want it to be a deep freeze where he's holding the ball. And look, that's the worst part of his game because as opposed to Andrew, who anticipates a little bit better at this stage, he tends to wait for it to get open. So when you do run the play action, you want a quick play fake. You want a seam in a trailer or a post in a check down, what I call touchdown check down. You want it very much defined for him as to what he's looking for. Just a 1-2 go. That's it on the deep play action. The rest of it will be about the same. Also, you want to get him going with the screen game, plus screens are really good against the 3-deep zone. They do a lot of bailing at the corner. So, I think you can get him going with screens, but screens, quick rhythm, bootlegs, and defined play action. Now, the other thing that he will be good at, and this is really important against this team, is the RPOs, the run-pass options, and he knows how to do that. This is a way to run the ball against a light box, but if they play 8-man front, which they do most of the day, boom, you're able to throw the ball. This is a team that is going to be one-on-one on the outside almost all day long. They got a really good corner in Hayward. They got a great nickel in Desmond King. And then Davis on the other side is a weak link. But they are going to define. Those outside corners are going to be undressed most of the time. So you can reduce the game plan mentally for him. And we now have the speed on the outside that I think we can threaten and get daylight underneath when you want to throw.
Rick Venturi's on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. All right, I'm going to take a break, or we're going to get clear after 5. I want to go ahead and we'll take some calls for you because you're good with that, correct? At 239-1070,
sure,
right?
Sure.
We're good with that. And this, I want to get to the Chargers and what defensively they're going to look like without one of their best players in Derwin James, and then offensively what they're going to look like without one of their better players, assumingly here, in Melvin Gordon, who is not going to be back, according to many. I want to get your opinion on both of these players being out and the effect it will have on both sides of the football. How's that? All right, Rick, back with you in a second. We'll put you on hold. Woo! Meantime, your calls for Rick, if you guys want to go on and talk with Rick, have a question, whatever, at 239-1070. Let's get back to Rick Venturi on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. So let's start defensively for the Chargers. How is this thing going to look with the loss of Derwin James, who was spectacular in that secondary as a rookie a year ago?
Yeah, that's a big loss because James wasn't just a safety as we know a safety. He was a all-purpose Swiss Army knife. Basically, he played a safety on early downs, but most of the time at the end of the year, Gus Bradley, who's the defensive coordinator, played a lot of nickel, dime, and even quarter. Sometimes against Baltimore, they played 7 defensive backs and 4 down linemen the whole game. Now, they could do that because of the great player they have at nickel in Desmond King, the best nickel in the National Football League in terms of run, pass, and playmaking. But what really made it go was with Derwin James, you had a guy who could come down on the weak side, and he was as good as a linebacker, better athlete, terrific cover guy, and blitzer. I mean, he got his sacks from that position. So many times, there'd be one linebacker and those guys, a lot of dime defense, which means they were really, really fast on the line, and they didn't compromise the run as much as you would think. So I think that's a big loss right there. They really like Adrian Phillips. They may do the same thing. You're going to have to probe him early and to see which way he's going to go. Like I said, don't let that bother you, because at the end of the day, no matter what personnel group's in the game, they do the same things over and over on first and second down. So they may use Phillips in that role, or they may use their two linebackers now that they got Davis from Carolina. They may just go that way, Davis and Brown as two linebackers with the nickel, because that's really what they want to play. They're gonna play nickel and dime all day long, and they're a team that if you can get ahead in the count, they're really unsophisticated until third down. Now, third down, you really have to be ready, but it's a huge loss from a defensive standpoint, because he's a guy that impacted their defense in so many ways.
Rick Venturi is on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. I mentioned offensively, too, without Melvin Gordon as he continues his holdout. I want you to factor in that loss, because they're saying all the right things about being able to make up for him not being there. But also I want you to go in-depth on this offensive line, which is shaky at best going in.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, basically what they're going to try to do, and they will tell you, that they won 4 games without Gordon. But Gordon was over 1,300 total yards and 14 touchdowns. Gordon was particularly great around that red zone. He knows how to find that end zone. He is a top-tier back, no question. Now, what they're going to try to do is go 2 for 1, not so much a committee, but 2 for 1. And, the guy number 1 is Austin Ekeler, who will be one of their running backs, along with Justin Jackson, the kid from Northwestern. Now, they're 2 different kinds of backs, and you must stop the run. You have to make this team one-dimensional. You have to make them a pass-only team, and I'll go the full circle and get to the offensive line. But you cannot let them run the ball with those 2 guys. And understand, Ekeler is a space player. He's a guy that you got to expect on the edge, screens, draws, all kinds of loose plays. He's an elusive type guy. When Jackson is in the game, you want to play him from inside out. He's a hard zone runner, put your foot in the ground and go, kind of a one-cut guy, tough, much better protector. Ekeler, when he's in the game, you can blitz. He's a poor protector. But they're going to try to get by with that. That is not a strength, but they're going to try to live with it, and they have to get that running game going a little to protect that offensive line. Where they're strong, and you have to have a really good plan, the best part of their team, other than Rivers, is obviously their receiving core. Mike Williams is a real comer. I mean, Mike Williams is a guy, with really good numbers in terms of yards per catch, 15-4, 10 touchdowns. He's in the top 10 in terms of yards per catch. Mike will be on the weak side most of the time. He's a guy they're going to run deep, John. They're going to run posts with. The biggest thing with Williams is don't let him get the big one. If you can take the big one away from him, he's not going to catch 1,000 balls. The guy you have to have a plan for situationally is Keenan Allen. He's really the go-to guy. Williams is the go bang 8 guy. Keenan Williams is the guy that they're going to move around in stacks and bunches. Critical situation, game on the line, red zone, game on the line. You better have a way to clamp him. He's a top guy. He's 1,000-plus yards guy, Pro Bowl. Not a speed merchant, but a terrific possession guy. So, I mean, that's a big key, I think, on those 2 guys. And then the emerging guy, the guy you didn't see a year ago, is Hunter Henry, the third down, who's their tight end. And they use their tight end, if you remember, Gates and Rivers is very predictable with this. If you get them, let's say you stop them on 1st and 10, what his get-back operation mode has always been to go to Gates. Well, that's the young kid, Hunter Henry now, who's a really good tight end who missed the season last year, number 86. He's a move guy. He's their version of Ebron. They like to come back to him. And then if it's third and short, like third and 2 to 3, same way where he always used to use Gates, well, now he's using Henry. So what you really need to do is you need to stop those two runners on early downs, know which one's in the game because it's critical because the offense changes. And then you have to have specific plans for those receivers. One, stay on top of Mike Williams. Two, clamp. You got to clamp situationally Allen, and then be ready in certain spots for the tight end. Now, what you want to do, this is a game you got to play Canadian football with their offense. You want to get them behind in the count. You got to win first and second down. This is one of the worst offensive lines we will play all season long. This is, I call it a Baskin Robbins, which just walk in and take a number because you can attack anybody along that line. Basically, I'm watching Kansas City last year in December against them, and I'm watching Houston and Jones absolutely kill their right side, which is Tevy and Schofield, who I think is their worst offensive lineman, their right guard. Well, if you look at us, we do have Houston, and he killed them. And then we can put Autry right there in place of Jones, and you have a very, very favorable matchup. And you can straight rush them. You can run the Tex games, which is tackle and then crosses. And then I like on the other side, I like Toure on our right against Scott. See, they lost Okung. Nobody even talks about that. They talk about Gordon, and like you said, they talk about Derwin James. But Okung was the one strength they were going to have at left tackle. The kid that was, at Seattle for so long, developed the blood clots, definitely is out for this one and will be out indefinitely. So they've had to take Scott, who's a young kid, and play him at left tackle. He's not a really good athlete. I don't think he can handle Toure athletically. And then Feeney on the left side. I mean, this team really, really struggles. Now, he does a good job of getting rid of the ball. That's why they don't have an overwhelming amount of sacks, but they have a tremendous amount of quarterback hits. And what you can do if you pressure him, and you can blitz him too, what you can do is you will force him into bad throws. You won't necessarily get a ton of sacks, although you might. But what you'll do, really, even at worst, if you can get him in third and long, is he will, because Rivers is a competitor. He's tough. He'll throw with guys close. I mean, he'll throw with guys hanging on. But what happens is his accuracy goes way down. I mean, they're 15th in giveaways, so they give it away, and they're not great on third down. And most of that is because of protection. So, again, you got to own those first two downs. Nothing big to Williams. Situation coverage on Allen. And then you've got to beat that offensive line. And I think you can beat them with 4, but I wouldn't be afraid to blitz them, particularly if Ekelar's in the game, because he's a poor pass protector. But the Achilles heel on this team, without question, is their offensive line. And the only way they can do that, the only way they can protect it, is to get the running game going and possession passing and kind of stay out of those third and long. So that's where the ball game is really going to be. Same way on the other side of the ball. You want to dominate first and second down because the two best players, I talked about the two good defensive back, Desmond King and Hayward on the corner, but the two best players on the team, the two most dangerous players, is Melvin Ingram and Bosa on the edges. Ingram is, I think he's the best on the edge. He's 44.5 sacks. Bosa was out, but still was productive. Gets more dangerous when they move him inside on third down. They will move Gordon around in their 3-down package and bring Rochelle in there. They're most dangerous, John, in that third down NASCAR package, because in that down, then it's Rochelle and it's Bosa inside, it's Gordon spinning all around, and then the kid that looked good in the last couple preseason games was Jerry Tillery, the kid from Notre Dame. So, they're going to be able to do that. They're going to be able to rush the passer extremely well. we showed vulnerability in the preseason to blitz, and they have those blitzes, those double sugars, those odd blitzes, and King off the edge and Phillips off the edge. So, we've got to be really, really good there, and the more we stay out of third and long, the better. I would also say that when we run the ball early, we want to make sure that Mebane gets blocked inside. He's not a big sack guy, but he's one of the toughest nose tackles in the league versus the run. So, my idea on running the ball is you want to hit them quick. They're going to be a nickel, so, I do think you can run it at them some. When you do run, I like to make sure that I'm double-teaming Mebane. So you're kind of running, I don't want to get geeky here, but into the bubble, into the kind of what I call the 5 technique. That's where teams have hurt them. And then every once in a while, I would jump into 3 tight ends and see if they stay nickel. And then if they do that, then you want to pound the edges a little bit. So, there's ways to do it. You keep your RPOs hot now, which we didn't run a lot of in the preseason for obvious reasons, but you want them here now against this stuff. So, that's what you're looking at. Again, Ingram and Bosa on the edge, and those guys will be all around. Sometimes Bosa will be on the left, sometimes he'll be on the right. Same way with Ingram. And then Ingram sometimes will be standing up inside. So, again, the biggest thing is to try to keep them, out of third and longs on defense. I will say this: their scheme is simplistic, really simplistic, single high, 4,000 ways to play cover 3 or cover 1. So, again, they're going to undress the corners. Here's what I like against them in terms of moving the ball against their defense. Screen all day long. They play a lot of zones, so they're going to concede flats. They're going to concede underneath. So you want to be able to screen them, wide receiver screen, running back screens all day long. Quick rhythm. When they come out of their net zone, hit them before they can get set. Play actions in the seams because they don't carry the seams on the 3 deep. And you got your tight ends and your slots and Hilton over the middle. You can hit those guys very quickly in those seams in that regard. So, those are the things that I really like. And I would say this is, when in doubt, in the games on the line, go after Davis, number 43. He's going to be opposite Hayward, and those guys will flop. They may put Hayward to Hilton. I don't know, but they won't do a lot of double. It's just not their deal. They'll play some man on third down, and they'll play some matchup 4 in the red zone, but they're basically a 3-deep zone, which I think actually makes it easier for Jacoby.
It's Rick Venturi right there getting you set for Sunday and the opener for the Colts on the road in Southern California against the LA Chargers. He's on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline, and it's a new wrinkle with Rick joining us weekly this year. He has agreed to take some of your calls, and we'll go to some right now at 239-1070. Rick, we're joined by Jeff. Jeff, you're on with Rick Venturi. Go ahead.
Hey, thanks for taking my call, Coach. This may be a stupid question, but in your own personal opinion, for the Colts,
what happened?
The defense have to be dominant. Which one would you say would be the
Rick, did you hear that? Because he cut out for a minute. I did not hear it.
No, I'm fine. And basically what Jeff is asking me is a very good question. He's asking me without with a quarterback new and not being quarterback centric, do the Colts have to be more dominant on offense than they are on defense? I would say this, that our defense has to be better. They made great strides last year, but I think from a dominating standpoint, they got to take the next step. They've got to be less giving out on the field so that they don't give up the ball control battle. I think they got to match tighter. The bend but don't break was good. They played great in the red zone. But I think with the talent they have, assuming that Yassine is ready, that's the one question I have going into Sunday about the defense. I think could be a defense, and I think it will be important to answer Jeff's question that this is a defense that can take it from 21 points per game, let's say, down to 18, which would be dominating. And then offensively, I don't know that you'll be dominating, but I think you can be pretty doggone good because there's just so many weapons there in the perimeter, and there's no reason to believe that our offensive line doesn't play like it did last year. It has not yet in the preseason, but let's give them credit. Let's say they will be there Sunday.
It's via email, jmv@1070thefan.com. A question for Rick Venturi. You mentioned, Rick, a little bit earlier about the Achilles heel for the Chargers. Where is the Achilles heel for the Colts, in your opinion?
Well, I don't know that there's Achilles heel for the Colts. I think the thing I like about the Colts, and I've liked about them since the beginning of training camp, is when I walk out on the field, I just don't see a bunch of liabilities like I have in the past. Like I can't say, well, in the past we've said, well, this is really a good team, but their offensive line isn't very good, their secondary isn't very good. I don't see any spots where there's glaring weaknesses. I would say my biggest 5 concerns going into the game, and they're not necessarily worries, but the thing I'm going to be looking about, and Joe Stasiak talks about this all the time, is number 1, are they combat conditioned for this game here? They haven't played much in the preseason. I think they worked hard in practice, but very little combat readiness in games. That's number 1. Number 2, who is Jacoby? I don't think we really know. We can't go on 17. 17, obviously, he wasn't surrounded by much. I'm more concerned that I thought he was just very average in the preseason, except for the 20 minutes and the 10 throws that he made against the Cleveland 2. So, number 2, how well will they use him? How well will they play? I think number 3, and I think I've answered this question, but the question you really ask is how really good is this roster? We think it's pretty good, and I think it's pretty good. But, it's one thing to be a roster that complements a great quarterback. It's another thing, and that's kind of what Jeff was asking, that now has to dominate the game. It's no longer good enough to bend but don't break. You have to dominate the game now on different areas of the field. I think number 4, and this just happens in the preseason, I really was concerned about our blitz pickup. That's partially offensive line in the summer. They weren't together. But, that's a little bit of everybody. And then, as I said, number 5 is that, I think the defense, as good as it is and as good as it was last year, I think it needs to be even better, and it needs to be tighter out on the field.
Q&A with Rick Venturi via the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Josh Landers tweeted me this. I can't get through on the phone right now, but can you ask Rick to name who he would consider the Colts' current ambient players? And we're talking plural, I guess, here. Right.
Yeah, I think we're right. I think he's absolutely right. I think number 1 on defense for me, believe it or not, is Autry. I think Autry is when you get past Aaron Donald, he's the most disruptive inside player in the league. I think and the reason I give him the ambient is because you must game plan around him. If you think you're just going to zone run or single block him, he's going to be in your backfield all day. I think that Houston has that kind of talent. We haven't seen him a lot. I thought that the last 6-7 games for Kansas City, he was definitely ambient, and you can move him to both sides wherever the ideal matchup. He had a great game against the Chargers on the defensive left side. Obviously, Leonard, because of Leonard's playmaking ability, you always have to stay away from him. Or when you do things with him, you have to take care of him. I think those 3 guys on defense, and that's a good start. That's a good start. On offense, that's an interesting thing. There's no question that Hilton is. I think the combination of our 2 tight ends, if you put them together as a combination, I think they're ambient because they give you a headache. You have to think about, what you're going to do. Potentially we have others, but they have to prove it. I would say Hilton in the tight end package. Nelson certainly is ambient. It's hard to rate an offensive lineman as an ambient player. I'd say the most significant player, as much as I love Nelson, I'm not saying the best player, the most significant player to us is Costanzo. I don't think there's any question about it. If we don't really have a left tackle replacement, this team was totally different when he was there. Marlon Mack, who I like a lot, was different. The pass protection, 8 sacks over 11 games. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, we averaged about 121 in that run. And it was, partially Matt getting back, but Costanzo, I would have to say, is ambient for us.
All right, here's the final thing from me, Rick, before I let you go. And this has been noted many times, and certainly things have changed, most of which we believe for the better, other than we're still kind of wondering how the quarterback position is going to evolve. But this team, Rick, has struggled starting the season in the first 2 weeks in recent memory. Now, some of that has been with Chuck and other players and not as good of players. But what do you think about this team, the way they start? And it's tough because you got to start on the road, both in Southern California and then in week 2 in Nashville.
Yeah, it will be interesting. I think we're 1-9 in the last in the last 5 years. Yeah. I think we're 1-9 to start the season. That's for a myriad of reasons. I really didn't think Chuck's teams were ready coming out of training camp. I certainly think that Frank's teams are much more ready. It's a lot about who you play. I actually think we match up good against the Chargers. I don't think the national perception, once we lost Andrew, that blows everything out of the water. But if you really look at their liabilities and what they've lost, I think we're a really good matchup unless Jacoby just lays an egg. I mean, that's the only way that's going to happen, because I think we're the better team. I know we're the better team than Tennessee. There's no question in my mind. So, I look for us to get off to a good start. I think the biggest thing is, Frank's mantra is 1-0. And I think that's really the key. I phrase it this way. This is definitely a winnable game despite the media perception. The Chargers have good skills and they got a tough defense, but they have an immobile quarterback and a bad offensive line that will be their undoing. The Colts need to go out there now, and this is going to be 2019, and they have to play as a total team. This will not be the kind of team that we in Indianapolis are necessarily used to, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, because this team will have to win as a group, which it's capable of. It wasn't capable of this in the past. We'll win as a group rather than a purely quarterback and kind of a Gladys quarterback and the Pips kind of idea. So, that's what it really comes down to. We're looking at a different type of Colt team that we've seen, but I think one that's capable of being pretty doggone good.
I think about it this way, too, as far as what they did with Jacoby Brissett. That made a lot of sense. Certainly it's franchise tag-esque sounding monetarily, but, you do pay him, which you're going to have to do because he took over as a starter, but you're not married to him for the long-term future in case you want to go a different direction. And then with Hoyer, people would have to find something better. There just was nothing else, and I guess he would make as much sense as anybody else, and they paid him as such.
Oh, no, I agree totally. They made the best of this situation. The gesture to Jacoby, and I say gesture because they have the money, is not a long-term buy-in. It's basically a look-see, 32 games, basically. The $15 million a year, 20 guaranteed, pays him, down in the bottom of the 20, I guess 19 specifically, but that's a pretty fair rate for 2 years, not locking in forever. For instance, Andy Dalton has the 15th best QBR in the league. You believe it or not, he's right in the middle, and he's $16 million. So, that's probably a fair rate. And I say it's a fair rate because this is a guy that has proved nothing, really, other than all I hear about is the intangibles and how good he is and won't flinch and, this, that, and the other. Well, the intangibles are really good if you're decisive and you're accurate. Then the leadership matters. If those first two things aren't there, that leadership doesn't mean a dog on things. So, but they didn't strap themselves down. And then Jacoby, from that standpoint, gets a $30 million, but he gets 20 guaranteed. So he has a lifetime $20 million annuity. He wasn't making anything, and he has 2 years to really prove himself. It's like taking really what it is. it's like adding that fifth year to a number one. So the money's right. And then Hoyer was the best available. I mean, we talked about it Friday. I mean, to me, it was Osweiler. Once Hoyer came into the picture, it was Hoyer. I mean, Hoyer's a guy, that is a guy that is, a solid. If you Googled him up, he would define journeyman. But that's not all bad. He's still a guy that's thrown 48 touchdowns. He has won 16 games, which is 11 more than any other quarterback in the building. He's had 37 starts. And what I like about him, and the fact that he is a journeyman with 5 teams, I don't think is all bad. I look at it as a positive because it means that he can process quickly. He can transferability, so he'll be ready next Sunday. And he comes from the Patriots. They're very sophisticated. Jacoby can help him with translations. Everybody runs the same stuff. They just call it differently. But the concepts are the same. Jacoby can say, hey, airport is a snag 7. I mean, so, just how he learned it. So there's some good things there. I think he's a guy that if you put him in the game, that he's battle-tested. NFL defenses aren't going to be too sophisticated for him. He's a guy that goes in. You don't have to change your offense. You don't have to reduce it. You can keep playing NFL football. He's battle-tested in that regards. He's not a guy, skill set-wise, that you want to play for 16 Sundays, but that's not what we're asking him to do. Ted Marchibroda taught me something when I worked with him. Ted was really good. He used to define quarterbacks as, 3-game quarterbacks, 4-game quarterbacks, 10-game quarterbacks. I think that Hoyer is somewhere in, between 4 and 6 if he has to play, and I think he'll be just fine. And there's no question that he was the best available. And in both cases, I mean, if you put their salaries together, it's still not a top-tier salary for a quarterback for 2 years. And so you haven't ransomed anything in the future. You've given them confidence. You've spent wisely. And that is a big advantage of Chris being as frugal as he is. Things like this happen, and you can adapt financially, without losing any sleep over it.
So Rick Venturi every week right here, and we enjoy having your input as well. And I guess the next time I'll catch up with you is on Sunday, right? Game day?
Sunday, we'll be ready for that game day, and we'll go. And then of course our Monday night will be high test, both the game, and we'll be looking at Tennessee. And you can also catch me later with Matt Taylor over there on the Colts website on some podcasts where we even get into the game plan a little bit more thorough. So, people ought to keep their eye later in the week for that.
That's over on Colts.com. As always, my friend, it's awesome. Love having you back, and your breakdown is beyond belief. We love it, and I'll talk to you coming up on Sunday, hopefully before that.
All right, John, talk to you again this week.
You got Rick Venturi right there via the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. I'm way over. Let's do you.